like to thank the organizers for offering me the chance to give this lecture and share with you material from my recent fieldwork and my thoughts, reflections and perplexions on how to understand some narratives that I find both fascinating and enigmatic. These are personal experience stories about strange incidents, events that should not happen in our disenchanted modern world, where the supernatural and magic have been wiped out and deported to the realm of fiction. Yet some people have uncanny experiences. They encounter something extraordinary or even shocking, which provokes strong emotions and triggers storytelling. True, very often these narratives remain unheard, unread and unknown because they spread in small and intimate circles only. The supernatural world today is marginalized, trivialized, silenced, or explained away as an error of perception. However, Jason Josephson Storm, in his recent book, Myth of Disenchantment, claims that we have never become disenchanted because magic, divination, and the supernatural have never faded away, but appear in new contexts. The grand project of the Enlightenment started centuries ago, but it has had only a limited effect. Here you can see some statistical data of the supernatural beliefs from USA and Great Britain. As folklorists, we have a chance to observe closely how people embrace the supernatural and the other world, how they draft it in storytelling and how they maintain partnership with the otherworldly. What kind of conceptual tools do we have to make sense of this? I start from a short introduction about belief narrative as a relatively new genre category that is closely associated with the history of the International Society for Folk Narrative Research. Before the Society's 15th Congress in Athens, I was corresponding with Hedda Jason, who had suggested forming a committee, a research group within the ISFNR focusing on belief tales. The call for cooperation was published in the ISFNR newsletter in 2008 and was signed by folklorists from 12 countries. On 25th of June 2009, a group of folklorists gathered in Athens to plan future cooperation on the genres of belief. In the course of discussion, Robin Gwyndaff proposed that the belief tale be replaced with belief narrative to avoid the semantic vagueness of tale. In addition, narrative as an analytical category explicitly indicates a link with ISFNR. That is how belief narrative as a category was coined, and the Belief Narrative Network, a voluntary association within the ISFNR, was established. How do I understand belief narrative as a genre category? We know that from the early attempts to order and classify folklore as a set of genres, theoretical thought today has shifted towards social, communicative and generative approaches. Belief narrative is not a clear-cut analytical label. Rather, this concept calls for more synthetic thinking, to the heart of live folklore as a domain of building, transmitting and shaping knowledge, to epistemic claims, arguments, counter-arguments and uncertainties, all that is related to belief formation in discussion, discourse and communication. Belief narrative as a category does not do the work of systematizing folklore. Rather, it helps us to look beyond genre boundaries and breaks the limits of existing classification systems, such as the classical taxonomy of William Bascom, who identified myths, legends and folk tales as distinct forms of prose narratives that are either believable or not. Today, we do not see genres as isolated conduits. Instead, they appear in mixed, blurred and hybrid forms, charged with ambiguity and uncertainty. Belief is not a salient feature of certain genres, but a transgeneric phenomenon, sometimes explicit, but more often a hidden potential that permeates many discourses and practices. Belief extends far beyond the legendary and the mythic, and far beyond the religious or transcendence, to the mundane and to our daily lives, to discussions about politics, ideologies, values, well-being and health, of course, to vaccination and belief in science. But what is belief? It is one of those fundamental terms that has been critically examined and deconstructed in anthropology, in the study of religion, and recently also in folkloristics. In 1972, Rodney Needham published his monograph, Belief, Language and Experience. He disputed the empirical value of belief as a transcultural category and the existence of belief as a discernible mode of consciousness. It is too fuzzy, he claimed, to be used as an analytical tool. As other authors have shown, belief has been narrowly linked with Protestant theology, with its specific focus on mind and subjectivity, so belief has its problems. Well, I don't think that there is anything wrong with belief as a concept in folkloristics and narrative studies. Belief illuminates the relationship between individuals and stories, the values that they carry, the bonds between people and their engagement with their tangible and intangible worlds. Belief as an abstract notion has a firm place in emic and ethic discourses, both in folklore and folkloristics. As Marilyn Motz has remarked, the concept of belief is so central to the discipline that it is hard to talk about folklore without talking about belief. However, rather than studying belief as an entity, she draws attention to the work of folklorists in examining expressive practices by which people create, articulate, teach, disseminate, discuss, challenge, question, adapt and debunk beliefs. The end of the quote. As narrative is one of the basic cognitive tools in structuring the world and making it meaningful, narrating is certainly one of the major practices of expressing and processing belief and beliefs. A similar shift towards understanding belief as a practice can today be observed in the study of religion. In 2018, Jason Blum published an article on the critical assessment of the term belief. Blum considered many critiques of the notion of belief as legitimate, but concluded that the concept is valid, even inevitable, in the study of religion, not because religion needs belief, but because human beings have beliefs, and because belief constitutes a central dimension of the phenomenological, psychological, and social lives of human beings. Both religion and folklore are inherently human activities. As much as people need belief, many folklorists need it as a concept to think with. One of the fundamental cognitive problems about folk narrative is the question of believability and the veracity of stories, about fictionality and factuality as two alternative epistemic modes. The supernatural in legends can be interpreted symbolically or as the poetics of the genre, as a set of fantastic elements that have been implanted in otherwise realistic stories. However, making a distinction between the cognitive modes of factuality and fiction is often impossible in storytelling. Some stories hide the fictional character well, others rely on somebody's actual experiences, but their folkloric reproduction leads to fictionalization. Such narratives expose a state of in-betweenness amidst the realistic and the fantastic. Legend is one of those genres that lives in such an ambiguous zone of liminality. According to Kaarina Koski, legends are concerned with exceptional, potentially true events in the margins of the narrator's and listener's own conceivable social reality. They debate and contest the stability of everyday knowledge. So, legend is about something that possibly can happen at the edges of the world as we know it, and might make us doubt about something that we thought we know. Legend as a genre takes us to the liminal transit zone between the story world and life. In addition, other genres such as memorates, oral histories, autobiographical stories, anecdotes, rumor, news and fake news are formed in the interplay between factuality and fiction. Making fun of somebody's fears of the supernatural, ridiculing the stupid devil in jokes, and making parodies of religious prayers are all cases of generic liminality, where different expressive modes coexist and merge into something ambiguous and controversial. Storytelling itself can be interpreted as a liminal act, happening at the threshold between story world and tangible life world. The boundary between fictional and factual is often invisible, and stories can shift between the two modes. Liminality does not mean standing on threshold and borders. It refers to movement between domains and the related uncertainty. As we know, liminality as a concept emerged in the seminal work of the French folklorist Arnold van Gennep. on transitional stages in human life that he called the rites of passage. Victor Turner discussed the liminoidal as a state of sacred marginality. He applied it to socio-cultural life and to the discussion of various institutions, practices, situations, and lived experiences. Today, liminality has become a transdisciplinary category. Björn Thomassen has outlined its three basic dimensions. First, subject experiences of single individuals, social groups, and whole society. Secondly, temporality of sudden events, periods, and full epochs. And thirdly, spatiality of specific tangible thresholds, areas of zones and countries, or larger regions. To these three aspects, we can add the liminality of genres as modes of expression. All four can intertwine, for example, in legend tripping. In a midnight visit to a haunted house, all of those liminoid aspects become meaningful as parts of the experience. Liminality helps us conceptualize the current processes in the world affected by global warming, environment crisis, and the pandemic. We are rapidly moving towards a worrisome future, but do not know how long this transition will be and what will eventually happen. The pandemic has underlined the regional and political borders, and we all know the meaning of territorial passage discussed by Van Gennep in his book with multiple examples in the second chapter. This is a passage from one country or province or manorial domain to another, accompanied by obstacles and formalities. We have all experienced such thresholds and the state of liminality, perhaps while waiting for the results of medical tests. We all have expressed the related concerns in storytelling. From these preliminary notes, let's move to some examples of my recent fieldwork. Because of the global pandemic, a lot of research has today shifted to the internet, but fortunately Estonia has enjoyed some liberal periods when restrictions have been waived and it has been possible to visit new places and meet people. The first examples illustrate the relationship between the living and the dead, one of the fundamental dimensions in all religions and cultures. It is impossible here to offer an introduction to the history of Estonian death culture and afterlife beliefs. Let me just say that graveyards in Estonia are important places. It is common to take care of the family graves, decorate them with flowers and light candles on them. A typical graveyard in Estonia has crosses, memorial boards and benches at family graves. It is common to take time at the grave and sit in silence. Does this mean communication with the other world? Perhaps. Here are a couple of photos from a recent religious festival in Saatse, southeastern Estonia, where people gather at family graves to joint meals. This happens right after an Orthodox service in the church. Feasting in graveyards is typically Orthodox, whereas the rest of Estonia has been strongly influenced by the Lutheran religion, where we do not have such family reunions at the graveyards. However, a strong connection between the living and the dead is a continuous tradition everywhere. In July 2020, I visited Mõisaküla. It's a small town on the Estonian-Latvian border. The place is somewhat isolated, and it is away from the main routes and tourist attractions. The rails that once led to Mõisaküla have been taken away. The former railway station and local factories have been closed. Many young people have left the town, and the old generation prevails. One day, I had arranged an interview with an elderly lady. I called her Aino. I waited for her, and she came an hour late together with her daughter, whom I here call Liina, whose age is around 50, while Aino is close to 80. Liina soon explained the delay. That's what she said. I saw the dead in my dreams last night. We went to the graveyard to light a candle. This means that the weather will turn stormy. Aino said, yes, if you dream of the dead, something bad will happen. If you give something to a deceased one in your dream, you give away something. It could be an animal or something. My mother-in-law had died and I had sheep. My dead mother-in-law kept visiting me in dreams. Once she wanted to get a ball of yarn, and I gave her a woolen ball of yarn, and the lamb died. So it happened, you can see. I would not say that we believe in this, but you see such things happen. That's all. I cannot say anything, but this is like history. The last comments are not easy to interpret in the Estonian language. Aino seems to emphasize that we are not talking about vague belief, but about knowledge, which is confirmed by factual evidence. Aino continued, reflecting on another disturbing incident of contact with the other world, also in Mõisaküla. The story is about a mother and her daughter. Aino said, the mother lived, but when her husband suddenly died, he started to haunt his home. The woman could not sleep in her bed and went to the other room. Then her daughter went to sleep in that bed, but she could not. She woke up because her father was standing next to the bed, you see. And the woman felt that the man was strangling her. Therefore, the woman kept going to the graveyard to light candles. The whole family went together. Once the woman went there alone to talk. After this, the haunting stopped. When I asked about the husband, Aino said that he had been an alcoholic but a good working man. The reason for his ghostly attack remained a mystery, but the solution came when the widow had a private conversation with him. Such cases of supernatural assault remind us of the work of David Hufford, who studied experience stories of nightly spirit attacks, showing that in some cases the cultural explanation model should be replaced with experiential source theory. In the case of sleep paralysis, stories emerge from real psychological experiences. Aino continued. Recently the mother died and started to haunt her home too, because the daughter threw her half-sister out of the house on the very day of the burial and the memorial feast. Lina said, yes, these are family problems. Aino continued, probably the daughter is feeling guilty, or perhaps I make this connection, I do not know. I do not know anything more, but the mother gave no peace to the daughter. She inherited the house and property and everything which was there, and the half-sister was kicked out. This case of haunting is also factual and firm for Aino, and she proposes an explanation. The dead mother is disturbed by the conflict within the family because the daughter claims the house and neglects her sister. Ties with property, possession and homes are strong in Estonia, and very often the related conflicts extend to the other world. The dead maintain an active role in regulating ownership, basic values and morals. Serious discords in families upset the other world. From here, let's move to the second set of interviews. Held in a very different setting and very different people of much younger generation. In October 2020, I visited the capital city Tallinn to talk to some people whose position in Estonian society is so marginal that they nearly are invisible as individuals. They exist as an anonymous and troublesome social group. Their identity is based on one feature: they are drug addicts. And the drugs that they use are strong, such as fentanyl and amphetamine. Of course, to prepare for the interviews, I had to familiarize myself with the subculture. My interviews took place in the rooms of the Convictus, non-profit organization. People who work there help drug addicts with needle exchange, food and psychological counseling. Of course, I needed help myself to make the necessary contacts, and here I express my gratitude to Anneli Uusküla, professor at the Institute of Family Medicine and Public Health, University of Tartu, and to Grete Org, the Convictus project manager. Grete helped me find people who were willing to talk with me about their worldviews and their life stories. It was not difficult to find the interviewees, both Estonian and Russian speakers. It might not be surprising that death and the dead popped up frequently in interviews because due to overdoses, suicides, accidents and illnesses, many of their friends have passed away. Well, in these photos you can see the rooms and also the room where the interviews took place, and this takes us to the first interview with Marek. I have changed his name, of course. He was less than 30 and he started the interview with the following statement. From my generation, half of the people are dead. When we started with drugs, there were 4 boys named Marek in Mustamäe district. Only 2 are still alive. I am one of those 2. He discussed in details his close relationship with the dead, describing his first experience as follows. First, when I really perceived them, it was the day before my grandfather's funeral. There is a closet with a mirror in my mother's room. It started to shake in a strange way and I felt cold air at the back of my head. Usually when the dead come, you can feel it clearly from the change in temperature. Then I didn't know that they feed on temperature. Who knows? Now I rather see the dead as balls of light looking like orbs. Marek told me how he interacts with the dead. I have started this way of communication, that if I see a ball of light, I make an agreement with it, just like with a pendulum. That movement from left to right means yes, up and down means no. Then you start asking questions with yes-no answers. In the beginning, I thought that there was one deceased who communicates with me. Then I understood that actually there are 2 of them. Then I asked them to make a difference. One ball of light is of red color, the other of green color. I asked, what do you ask them? Marek responded, the most simple things. Should I go to steal from the shop or should I trust this person? Such kind of things. I was puzzled and asked, is this somewhat playful or quite serious? Do you make conclusions based on this? And Marek responded, of course I do. This is far from play. This is my life. If I ask, I really want to know. Marek added that it is his 2 dead friends who appear as balls of light. When I asked if he discusses his supernatural experiences with his living friends, he responded, I do. I have a couple of friends and girlfriends with whom I can talk about this. Very few. Usually when you talk about such things with people, you are categorized as crazy. You should not talk about this. Appearance of the dead as balls of light in the Estonian context is unusual, and the described communication with them is peculiar, an idiosyncratic way of mediumship. In this case, we have a purposeful and positive connection with the other world, and notably, we have a strong indication of public attitudes about such personal ties with the other world. Belief in spirits or ghosts is ridiculed. Talking about this appears to be stigmatized even among the marginalized people, such as drug abusers. Another interviewee, a young woman, told me that she has lost more than 30 friends. They are dead, but they keep accompanying her. She said, there are not many people to talk with regarding these topics, and what I see and feel. In my sober life, that's too much. Sometimes I think, do I have a psychosis and have to go to the mental hospital again? But I have never heard voices in my head. I have not had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. For sure, the other world around us here exists. The above stories represent a wide but hidden tradition in Estonia and generally did not surprise me, even though they included several unique details. Let's come to the next story, and that's my last example. This did surprise me, because I had never been in contact with tradition of another social group whose identity is formed around a shared activity. These are hobby archaeologists who use metal detectors. Their work is to scan the fields, forests, gardens and meadows to look for archaeological findings. Well, they also find bombs and weapons from the 20th century wars, from the Second World War. In June this year, I made some interviews with these people and found out that they have a rich storytelling tradition beliefs and values, and not surprisingly some tensions with state authorities such as the State Board of Heritage Conservation. The following story was told by a man whose age is a bit more than 50. As it is too long to include in full in this lecture, I will compress it and tell you the story. I offer later only a couple of passages from these verbatim translations. I call the man Raido, and he was working with a metal detector in a field. Nearby was an ancient grave mound and place of settlement. However, he noted that he had the permission of the landowner, and the place was away from the archaeological site, which is protected by law, so there was nothing illegal going on. It was important for him to make it clear. The sun was shining and there was absolutely no wind. When Raido went to the car to sort his findings, something shocking happened. A terrible wind came, starting from the corner of the field, so strong that it bent the young trees down to earth and moved toward him with a hissing sound, whirling up dust. Raido turned his back to the wind and pressed his findings to his chest. The wind went through him and hit the trees on the other side of the field. Raido was stunned to see that the gust of wind was quite narrow, perhaps 10 to 15 meters only, as trees standing a bit further away did not move. The end of the story is as follows. This caused a strong emotional reaction. It took my breath away. I simply took the things, and let's be honest, it was such a moment of confusion that I did not bury them in the field. I just threw these things into mud in the bushes. They sank into water and I forgot about the place. Later, when I went home, I started to digest what it could have been. There was something that had attracted my attention, a piece of metal with 5 or 6 corners. Later I found many parallels in different stories that this could have been a token of witchcraft, Nõiamärk, or a local sign that the place has magical protection. Naturally, I don't know the answer, but my thoughts guided me that way. I have never visited that place since. Later, Raido clarified what had happened. It's my interpretation that I took something that I should not have taken from there, because the wind came exactly at that moment to shake these things out of my hand. Until they were in my pocket, nothing happened. Well, we can propose an animist reading of the case. Neo-animism is one of the rising fields in the study of religion, focusing mainly on indigenous peoples, on Amazonia, of North America, of Siberia, generally remote regions of the world, far away from the modernized West. British scholar Graham Harvey writes about acting things as object persons, such as eagles who carry messages to Native American Indians, and how the Maori meeting house, the Hinamihi, is an ancestor. The animist world is alive. Trees, waters and rocks can have personhood, similar to humans, animals and spirits. Based on Bruno Latour's statement that we have never been modern, Graham Harvey suggests that perhaps we have always been animists. He gives examples of people talking with their cats or computers. Here we have a more powerful example of live and spirited nature in 21st century Estonia. According to Raido's experience, wind can have not only power, but also will and agency. Or perhaps the place itself, an ancient grave mound, took agency and protected itself. There is something about Raido's memorate which seems even more surprising. It turned out that his experience is not unique, and other hobby archaeologists have gone through similar experiences. An attack from the wind as a mysterious power. So that's what Raido said when he continued his story. Others have told me similar stories. Andrei, with whom I was searching, he told me, but I won't repeat his words because I may be wrong. I don't remember the details, but he had something similar, and of course Markus had the same when he hid himself in the tent. The one experience with the tent, this is very mystical. However, if he would have been brave enough to look out of the tent at what actually was going on, it could have been more interesting perhaps. When he told me the tent story, how the wind blew from one side, from the other side, from the third side, this sounded familiar to me. I have lived through it and I believe this story. What is remarkable in the last example is that it includes references to previous cases of storytelling. As we soon hear, Raido has quoted some phrases from the story of Markus verbatim, so it's a double-voiced utterance. This was the experience of Markus, who had shared the story, and some original phrases can be recognized. We can see that hobby archaeologists share their knowledge, and stories important and unique events are told several times to several people. Stories evoke memories and connections with other narratives. Therefore, we can say that they are embedded in tradition. Raido referred to the experience of his friend Andrei, who had had similar troublesome experience with the wind. However, he did not want to retell Andrei's story, as he was afraid of making mistakes and misrepresenting the case. Truth is important here. Raido was also careful about presenting his experience as factually as possible. He processed the event mentally and added his interpretation later, suggesting that he had discovered a magical item, a powerful metal token which protected the area since ancient times. His belief was that moving this token caused the terrible wind. Perhaps it disturbed the place, its invisible inhabitants, or there was magical power hidden in that piece of metal. In the above discussion, Raido referred to another incident which had happened with Markus, another hobby archaeologist and a nature guide. Markus was sitting with us at the table, and of course he told his story. Likewise, it is too rich in detail to be included in full, so you have to trust my brief rendering here. Together with a friend, Markus was visiting a mysterious site in Rapla County, North Estonia, surrounded by dense forests and wetlands. They were on a marsh island, a hillock in the middle of a bog. There were some ancient piles of stones on the slope of the hill. In the middle of the bog, these constructions looked strange. Markus and his friend were curious to find out the purpose of these structures. Perhaps something was hidden under the stones. So they started to dismantle one of the piles, shifting away stones one by one. Markus had asked permission from the place to do this before they started work, a kind of plea or prayer, what he said. I don't know how common this custom is among the hobby archaeologists, but it seemed natural for Markus. They could not finish the work in one day, so they stayed in 2 tents on the marsh island and continued the next morning. And then Markus forgot to say this prayer request to the place. Then the next day strange things started to happen. As Markus described, they both felt sick and were hit by headaches. The men took a rest and after some time felt better. So they continued the work, but after a while felt sick again. Both lay down in their tents. Next, I translate the words of Markus verbatim. Suddenly, from nowhere a huge gust of wind came, a storm, such a storm rose. It came and went through 3 times. From one side, the other side, the third side it went through. Well, this was the expression that we also heard from Raido when he summarized the case. It says something about how we memorize narratives. We don't remember just the plot. We also pick out some phrases from the former storytellings. Well, the story continues. In that moment, you felt that it would carry the tent away. The wind was so terrible. What was going on? Was there a thunderstorm coming? What's happening? Is it some kind of punishment or what? Or a warning? After the 3rd time, it passed and did not come back. There was peace again. Next, Markus and his friend stopped their work, put the stones back as well as they could, and left the place. Markus said, "Something which is possible, we may say, is that this was a funeral, or maybe a site which was holy because of some other reason, perhaps a place that had been closed or sealed with an oath. Or thirdly, the old energy that was released had a special, different kind of charge that did not suit us people living on the earth. Indeed, it did not suit us, as we made 2 tests, 2 people, and one of us, my companion, fell ill for a week. This gust of wind was pretty scary. More or less willingly, I had already stopped working. The second headache was a warning. When I went to the tent, I realized that when the wind, the storm shook the tent, I understood that it is forbidden to dig there. But please give me a lighter punishment. Can we think about this experience in connection with narrative tradition, traditional legends about hidden treasures in Estonia? Well, these are internationally widespread stories, and certainly we will find some common elements also in Estonian tradition. There is a connection that here we have 2 men working, and there is some kind of supernatural obstruction that stops the work. Mare Kalda has compiled an index of Estonian legends of hidden treasures, and there is even a corresponding legend type, P85, sudden change of weather, strong storm, thunder disrupts the search for treasure. However, our hobby archaeologists obviously do not rely on traditional legend telling, but their own personal experience. Still, the above stories have a strong link with the tradition of belief narratives. In Estonia, there is a great public interest in ancient natural holy sites of the pre-Christian religion. There is a strong movement to safeguard these places. Many of them are under state protection, although not all, and sacred trees can be endangered by ruthless landowners, timber merchants, and the logging industry. Just to give a short example, some years ago, the tabloid newspaper published this article with a scary headline on the front page: "Bloody revenge of ancient holy sites. Those who cut down groves or destroy sacrificial stones are stricken by unexpected death and severe accidents even today." The introduction to the article was a set of 3 compressed legends about the devastating power of holy groves. The title expresses a belief statement: drowning, burning to death, and sudden death befalls those who desecrates a grove, a sacrificial stone, a sacred tree, or a river. And the summary of narrative evidence is as follows. The 2 men illegally log in the holy forest in Haanja. After some time, one of them drowns, and the second one burns to death in a house fire. Fishermen who do not know the local customs disappear one by one in the water of Hiiehaud, a holy place in the Pärnu River. A man who gets the command to cut down the holy grove commits suicide after a short time. All these stories, which seem to represent the ancient tales of the Estonian folk, have happened to people over the last half a century. I don't know how much factual evidence is there behind the above stories, but certainly there is evidence that they are traditional warning legends. And we have sufficient evidence too on how experience, personal experience, narratives, and traditional legends intertwine. David Hufford has theorized about the 2 basic sources of the legendary. On the one hand, people carry cultural traditions of storytelling and they recycle beliefs. On the other hand, they also have extraordinary psychological experiences. If experience is unique and violates common sense, it is worth sharing with others. However, why would people want to talk about their rational experiences? These stories do not fit in the scientific mindset. The supernatural has been stigmatized, and uncanny experiences have become a pathological symptom. People who tell stories about the supernatural experiences often represent themselves as weak, vulnerable, puzzled, and even ridiculous. Yet we find strong undercurrents of narrating the supernatural in a secular country like Estonia. How come people tell these stories in spite of institutional pressures and expectations to think and act scientifically? What links the rational and the supernatural? What forms their contact zone, the liminal space of uncertainty, the mental state where the unknown becomes a story? Here I come to the final discussion, and it is time to bring in the last word of the title of this talk, emotions. Emotions were expressed in the interviews, but they have hardly been mentioned in my talk, in my lecture. I didn't use the word. As it is important, I left it to the end. It was typical to earlier scholarship in psychology to view emotional states as being essentially about the individual, something related to the subject and something private, comparable to belief. But the 21st century has brought a shift in the study of the social aspects of emotions and in practices of sharing emotions. It appears that there is something inherently social in fear, anger, sadness, joy, love, surprise, hope, and other emotions. And recent scholarship confirms that sharing emotional states is closely connected to storytelling. There is a lot of relevant work, but here I only refer to the work of Bernard Rimet, a Belgian psychologist. He writes that if people confront exceptional events, something for which their assumptive world did not prepare them, this evokes spontaneous emotional reactions. The more extraordinary is the event, the stronger is the emotional reaction, which finds an outlet in verbal expression. The event and the concomitant emotion are shared with others in storytelling, true, sometimes only in closed, intimate circles. As Rimet notes, this way, every significant experience of every single individual can enter the pool of shared knowledge, can impact on shared models of the world and on shared beliefs. In this process of storytelling, people construct their shared reality, an organized and meaningful vision of the world. Thus, it's not so much the extraordinary event itself that provokes storytelling, rather it is the emotional impulse related to the experience that needs to be shared with others through the medium of story. In this talk, I shared with you some stories from my recent fieldwork interviews, and I admit, to a great extent, it was the emotion of perplexion that made some stories for me more fascinating than others. Therefore, I shared them with you, and I would be glad to discuss them with you. We should not be surprised that we live in a world where different worldviews and beliefs coexist, sometimes in a dialogue, sometimes in isolation. Who other than the folklorists should note the hidden and marginalized discourses, should document and study them? We have done this since the 19th century, when folklore scholarship was mainly shaped by two powerful intellectual traditions, Romanticism and the Enlightenment. We carry the legacy of both of them. From Romanticism, we have inherited the admiration and idealization of traditions, including beliefs and narratives that have been transmitted for centuries. From the Enlightenment, we have inherited a mindset that sets rationality above emotion, and a sense of doubt or discomfort when we encounter such ideas and stories that we find hard to believe. Early folklorists put them aside in a special compartment and handled them as survivals and superstitions. Are we more prepared today for the intellectual challenge that such personal experience narratives pose to us as scholars? Do we have enough analytical and conceptual tools to study and make sense of them, of course as stories, as we can hardly access the experiences before and behind the words? Does the emotional impulse behind the story make us more emphatic to understand the storytellers? In any case, we can see that belief narratives fit well with a changing society and thrive in spite of, or perhaps because of, they are cognitive dissonance with a dominant rational mindset. Emotion and belief tend to be elusive categories. They are also closely related to each other. However, both of them are powerful forces that define us as humans and animate the vernacular knowledge and epistemology that we call folklore. Well, this is the end of my pre-recorded talk. I thank you for your attention, and now we can continue online to come to the discussion, and I'm happy to try to answer your questions. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for this lecture and for the range of fascinating examples from different fields and different age groups and different cultural contexts and environments, and for a great conceptual frame that you offered for understanding and analysis. And I would just like to invite those of you who would like to join live conversation to go back to ISFNR Congress page and to the schedule of today. And under the title of this lecture, you can click the blue button that says Join Live Conversation. So if you want to keep sending your questions through Vimeo chat, you're welcome to do that. And you can also still continue to watch this conversation through Vimeo, but in case you want to join our live conversation, you can also do that through this link. However, if you want to do that, if you want to take part in live conversation, I would just ask you to close this window, so to close the Vimeo window, and to open the one linking to the live conversation, so the Zoom link. Because if you have both windows open, the Vimeo one and the Zoom link, then it will be an audio nightmare for all of you and all of us, as the sounds will interfere with each other. But I'm seeing a lot of people already joining, so I'm very happy about that. So while we are gathering people to join us, I will just say that I'm really happy to meet you, at least online like this. Because actually we published your article, The Case of a Haunted Hospital in Tartu, in the book Encountering Fear, which came about as one of the results of Narrating Fear project organized by Institute of Ethnology and Folklore Research, which is one of the organizing bodies of this conference. So great to meet you in person, even though it is online. And while we are waiting for people to join and to ask questions, and I'm sure there will be plenty of those, I will take the advantage to actually ask the first question. Okay, so in your second group of examples, if I'm not mistaken, the person you're interviewing specifically says that they have not had the diagnosis of schizophrenia, that they haven't been diagnosed. Now, one of the criteria for schizophrenia would be the voices that they're telling you what to do, or the voices that are actually fighting in your head against each other of what you're supposed to do. And none of the examples that you were mentioning are like that at all. And I have actually a feeling that you are interested in making a distinction between belief narratives, which are related to people who have been conventionally understood as sane, or people who don't have actually official diagnosis, and those who actually do. But theoretically, a person diagnosed with schizophrenia might also have encounters with ghosts. One doesn't actually exclude the other. So the question would be, would you consider that person a credible witness, or would you make a certain kind of hierarchy in credibility in terms of this kind of believeness, what you're mentioning, like belief and believability, actually, not beliefness. And also, like, more progressive psychologists would consider schizophrenia to be curable in some instances. And would this person, if they have been diagnosed with schizophrenia at some point in their life, but currently are not experiencing symptoms, would you take their testimony as credible or believable? Or would you apply a different criteria for them in your research? And how would you even tell the difference when you're operating in the field of folklore research?
Yeah, thank you for this very important and serious question. Well, the question of discursive context is important, or it is how we as folklorists approach narratives, how we interpret them. But I think it is our duty to pay very close attention what actually has been said. Of course, we are part of the conversation, and our questions, they also shape the answers, or they prepare the answers a little bit. But in this case, in the second case of this marginalized people, drug addicts who know that there are all kind of stereotypes and beliefs about them. Here we can see this, well, I would call it the constraint of the medical discourse, the medicalization or pathologization of such experiences, and making a shift about the personal narratives, also taking them as not trustworthy, or turning them as, well, some kind of narratives of medical symptoms. The people are concerned about themselves, but we as scholars, we should certainly note this, and we should pay attention what kind of interpretive frames there exist, and what kind of frames certain people do use, what becomes actualized or topical in a certain moment of conversation. But I would not say that anybody's personal narrative will be less reliable as a source. They all have their life stories, their histories, their backgrounds. So as scholars, we should not build up any hierarchy. Well, as we look into the history of scholarship, or into the history of European culture, think about the work of Michel Foucault, The Madness and Civilization. We know how the mental health and mental conditions have been defined differently at different times, but these interpretive frameworks, certainly they do work, and in a culture that is dominated by scientific or quasi-scientific mindset, we see that people sometimes they are bothered of this possibility that they are stigmatized, that such evaluations they do matter for the people.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you so much. We've got a hand there. I think it's Eva. So yes, Eva first, and then Christina. So yes, please ask.
Yes, thank you, Ulo, for absolutely fantastic talk with a good overview about what is belief and all of this. But actually, my comment has to do with exactly what you were discussing just now, with the whole big elephant in the room in this case, which is mental illness. And I'm, as some people may know, I mix disability studies and folkloristics together. And I think when it comes to, and I was so curious about, I wrote some things down regarding that particular group that you talked about, that you had talked to, and just the fact that they are actually afraid of being stigmatized as crazy, and they don't talk to anybody about it. Just the whole big stigma around mental illness is such a huge thing to deal with. And I think kind of, if when you're trying to get around all of that, specifically with modern our contemporary stories, but also with older legends, bringing in MAD studies and disability studies to help out with the framework of how to understand the understanding of mental illness and how it is formed, is something that is absolutely necessary to do. And it would absolutely help with kind of giving people with or not with official diagnoses the credibility that society often doesn't give them. And personally, diagnosis doesn't matter to me. It's about, like Ulo, you were saying, it's about experience, and it's the experience that matters. But the fact that people that have these experiences are afraid of that stigma on its own is, I think, very interesting, remarkable. But sadly, I have to say I wasn't surprised. So maybe this is more of a comment than a question, but absolutely fantastic talk and a good discussion about this stuff. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Eva Thordis, to draw attention to this. Well, what can I say? I agree that just living in this time of post-enlightenment age where we are, where so many ideas, basic tenets and beliefs about what it means to be to live in a modern society, that these are like fading away, or we are not so sure anymore. We used to be so sure that nature and culture are separate, that urbanization changes the world, that there is one way towards civilization that came with these early ideas of evolution of culture. We seem to be sure that the supernatural is rather a question about fiction, but today we see that the mind and the outside world, nature and culture, they are so closely intertwined. Like they just referring to Bruno Latour and the other people who have discussed it extensively, the problems that are there with this binary opposition, thinking in binary opposition that came together with modernity. So it is quite fascinating to see how this world picture is shaking today. There are so many discourses that are coming in, and yet I would say it's my own belief that we are lucky to have this discourse of enlightenment, this faith in scholarship, in science, in rationality. That of course it's different if we approach these narratives from an artistic, religious point of view, or as scholars, as scientists, as folklorists. And as folklorists, it's our duty to try to interpret them, to analyze them, and to make sense of them, even if we are still perplexed. Thank you.
Okay, so next question is Christina, and then Evelina, and then Marines. Yeah, so Christina. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for a really wonderful talk, Ulo. There's so many aspects of it that are interesting, but I wanted to focus on your comment on animism in indigenous communities, and you use the word remote, that they are in remote places, and I just wanted to maybe think about that a little bit differently. That in these cases we have not so much personal experience or personal narratives. Well, we do have personal narratives, but not just personal experiences that have been marginalized, that have been put to the side, relegated to the past. And so it's not just individuals who be afraid of sharing these experiences, but whole communities and cultures that have been dispossessed of their knowledge and their histories, not just beliefs. So can we, as folklorists, maybe in other places, now I'm in Hawaii, I am in one of those places, but not everybody is. But can we as folklorists learn something from this vernacular knowledge that is a little different maybe from what Western theories like Latour or other materialist historical things are coming up now do for us?
Yes, thank you. We should do something about this, and I think it is a great challenge for us, for folklorists, as we are kind of also a marginalized discipline, and to have a kind of seen as a remote discipline, if seen from the center of the academia. What are the outstanding, what are considered the most powerful disciplines that lead the scientific thought today? When I use the word remote about these cultures of Amazonia or Siberia or South Asia, that is the conclusion that one can draw when you look at the scholarship that has been produced within the frames of this ontological turn in anthropology. Well, Escola, Riveros de Castro, and this were following Latour, and well, Graham Harvey, who has studied the Maori culture. And this has been one of the challenges also for this field of studies, or it is how to apply these ideas to the Western culture on ourselves. And I think that more and more work is emerging about this, and that's certainly where we folklorists can join in, because I think we have this ability to notice people and their stories, their beliefs that often are overlooked or hidden somewhere, that they are not known in public. And certainly it is there our duty to be attentive, to listen, to learn. But it's certainly also a challenge. It is working with what we call vernacular theorizing. I don't know. We have to cooperate with other disciplines, and we have to maybe overcome this sense of being ridiculed ourselves when we talk about folklore, or when we talk about the supernatural or the beliefs of the people. It is, well, these are all valid and useful categories. It is for not only for us, but also for people who think in these concepts, in these categories.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry I have to leave because I'm chairing the next section, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. Glad to see you here.
Thank you. Okay, so Evelina, it's your turn, and then Marinas, and then Nimeshika. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for excellent lecture. And I have some thoughts, and I want to share and to see what you think about them. I was very happy with your sharing Mark's story about wind, but not only because of content, but because Mark has such creative ability to compound a story using both conventional elements of narrating belief narratives, legends, and one's own narrative strategy. And we are not beings, we humans are not beings only of knowledge and only of beliefs. We are also beings of aesthetics. And I think that emotions even in belief narratives are aroused not so much by events, but because they are aesthetically well narrated events. So my question is for us folklorists today, are we sometimes neglecting this aspect? What do you think?
Well, the poetics of genres, it is, and poetics of storytelling and performance, so it's absolutely important. It is a part of the narrated experience, and analytically thinking of this side again, it is, yes, I agree, it is important for us as scholars. And emotion is also a category. It is not a very clear-cut category. It is, and that's also why I find it very, very useful to think in concepts that are not so clearly defined. And of course, it has so many layers. If we think about, if we talk about experiences, it could be about the experience that dominated there in the beginning, or that was there in the kind of essence of the experience, but then how it changes in storytelling. And in this case of the stories about the wind, it was possible even in this couple of recordings that they had to see that there are references to previous cases of storytelling. The story has been polished in storytelling, I don't know how many times. And the stories differently, they change, and each telling event is different. So yes, we can we can study each case separately. We can also think retrospectively. It is how stories, how they travel in time, or it is how they are shared and how they spread. And emotions and aesthetics, definitely they are important part of this process, maybe even a central part.
Thank you.
Marines, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Julo, for your fascinating talk and this concept between this linkage between tradition and contemporary discourse. And I was particularly interested in this concept of these conceptual pools before and behind the words. And I wanted to ask you if is some way connected with Evelina's question about if in fieldwork, if you identify discursive strategies to share socially these pools before and behind the words. I mean, you mentioned, for instance, that one of your narrators said they thought I was mad, but I was not mad. Do you understand? I don't mean if I was clear enough.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It is, yes, indeed, the question it is what happens before the story and how, and if we can somehow reach the experience which is behind the words.
Yeah,
I think they are useful analytical tools to think with, but it's my impression that actually the words come in the very beginning, or it just almost together with the experience, whatever happens, and it has been also written by some cognitive scholars that narrative as a frame, as a kind of pattern, it is something that is so deep in human mind that it's also something that evokes or shapes experiences, and then the words and the narrative schemes, those that have been picked out from the tradition or that maybe are prescribed by our brain, that they are there at the very beginning. So also it is difficult to think about this all together. It is to bring together the narrative, personal experience narrative, and the experience behind this, but this might be another such binary opposition that has come together with modernist scientific thinking, that if we are somehow able to go beyond this, or to see how they two actually meet, how they belong together, it might be helpful to make sense, to understand what is going on.
Yeah, you pointed out that challenge, so thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so next question, Nimeshika, and then Julian.
Professor Walk, it was fascinating to listen to your talk. Once again, I was transposed to the Tartu classroom. And this might be a bit naive, but I was wondering, how do we, in the context of studying liminality, as you had mentioned, and there are also these liminal boundaries to genres, because even when it comes to storytelling, it's difficult to distinguish between probably how, I'm sorry, my question is what is the difference between memorate, between belief narrative and personal experience narrative? In what way do they differ from each other? Because sometimes I find it difficult to identify what is this genre that I'm looking at, especially when they are determined by emotions and defined by them.
Yes, we have this variety of genre categories, and I would say that the personal experience narrative is one of the many belief narratives, because personal experience stories usually they convey some basic thoughts, some basic understanding, some beliefs, how things are, even if they are told in a humorous mode. But the genre categories, again, that they don't, in my mind, we cannot build up a very clear classification or system, or they just we need these in different situations when we are looking for different possible approaches to understand the stories. So both are very useful categories: personal experience narrative and belief narrative. And I think it is important to also to develop, to extend our vocabulary, how we talk about folklore, or how we talk about human expressivity.
Thank you.
Julian, your turn.
Yes, thank you for your talk. That was fascinating, and it's given us all a lot to think about. I will certainly be thinking about this for a long time. Some of this is, you mentioned at the end the ontological turn, which I take it is about treating our informants more seriously, giving more respect to our informants. And I can get this, okay, but I do have a problem with it. And my problem with it is that I study people who kill witches. And how much respect am I supposed to give to people who kill witches? How seriously am I supposed to take them? Now, I think the answer to this may be that it's my duty to understand them first, and that is absolutely what I get. But is there a way in which I can bracket that off from their desire to kill witches? Because I think treating these people with even more respect does bring us into certain difficulties when we deal with people like that. I would be grateful for your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Well, now that's the question: what comes first, or it is just should we think about individuals, or we should think about the discourses and then belief systems, and about the people who kill witches or start wars, or it is whatever is the obviously the evil what is going on. I think the question we should ask, why they do this, what makes them to persecute witches, or it is what are the mechanisms there, also the storytelling, but institutional creeds or institutional statements that force them to do this. And if they're institutional, or maybe they are folkloric, they are vernacular, there are so many factors behind this. And well, it's like a question about possession, either demonic or divine possession. It is, can we accuse somebody who is possessed by ideas, or by demons, by spirits, or it is what is going on here? That sometimes the concept of individual, it doesn't hold. We see that the discourses or beliefs or doctrines, actually they make people to act in a certain way, and they can be dangerous. And there are so many cases, so much evidence that show that actually belief in some doctrines, belief in some ways of action can be damaging and dangerous. So in your case, and you have been doing it in your wonderful work, well, the European witch hunt, the major monograph, the book, I really appreciate that you have brought in the folkloric element, and there is a lot of attention there about the belief stereotypes, well, the belief narratives that were behind these cases of witch persecution. It's not only institutional discourses, there is a very strong folkloric element, and these currents are there that make people act in a certain way. And of course, we cannot love all folklore that we see. There is so much racist, terrible, it is just the chauvinist folklore that we can't appreciate highly, but the scholars, we have to deal with this, and
we have to understand it, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
thank
you.
Thank you all for participating, and thanks for great questions and for a discussion. And thank you so much, Ola, for a wonderful talk and a wonderful engagement with the discussion. So see you in another session, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Yes.
Okay.
See you around.
Bye-bye.
Bye.